The date is January 28th, 1998. The survivor is Elizabeth Weiss, maiden name Bodek. The interviewer is Judy Canvasser Redmond, city Novi, Michigan, country USA. The language is English. Today's date is January 28th, 1998. I am here with Elizabeth Bodek Weiss. We are in Novi, Michigan, USA. The interview is being conducted in English. My name is Judy Canvasser Redmond. Would you please state and spell your name?
Elizabeth Bodek Weiss. The maiden name is Bodek, B-O-D-E-K. Last name is W-E-E-S.
And could you tell me where you were born, Mrs. Weiss?
I was born in Svalava, Czechoslovakia.
Could you spell the name of your town?
S-V-A-L-A-V-A.
What was the nearest large town that you were close to?
Mukachevo.
And would you please spell that?
M-U-K-A-C with a hyphen, E-V-O.
What was your birth date?
9/1/1924.
Could you please tell me the name of your parents?
My father's name was Samuel. My mother's name was Helen.
And what was your mother's maiden name?
W-E-I-S-Z, Weiss, with a Z at the end.
And your parents, did they have Hebrew or Yiddish name?
Yes, my father's name was Shmuel, and my mother's name was Chaya Hena.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
Not any longer. I had 4 that I knew of. 2 were born before World War I, before I was born, and they died before World War I, or in World War I.
What were their names?
Rachel, and I don't know my little brother's name. He was a year old, so I don't remember because I was born about 12 years later, so I don't remember that.
And your other brothers and sisters?
My brother that survived the First World War, his name was Abraham, and his nickname was Bumi, Adolf Bodek. And then in 1923, there was about an 11-year lapse between the children. After World War I, my parents had 3 children. My brother, Louis, was born in 1923 in April. I was born in 1924 in September, and my sister was born in 1926 in August. I'm the only one that's living.
What did your father do for a living?
We had a business. We had a variety store, a small variety store. Not groceries, but all kinds of other things. We had toys and clothing and not shoes and groceries. Other than that, we had, and of course now also we didn't have any china, but we had cosmetics and we had all kinds of other things.
Do you recall the name of the store?
It was Samuel Bodek's store.
And what did your mother do for a living?
My mom was helping in the business, and she was a homemaker. And as far as not a living, she was involved in charity organizations, and she did a lot of good things. She helped out a lot of poor people, and she nursed people, even though she didn't have to do it, but she was always busy with other people's problems, always.
Can you tell us a little about your town?
Well, there were about, I would say about 25 to 30,000 people, I think. And it was in a valley, in mountains around it. It was a beautiful, quiet town, and we grew up in a very safe sort of environment. We didn't know about problems at all. And we went to school, we had fun, we used to go skating, we used to go swimming, we had 2 rivers in our hometown. It was natural to do the sports that people have to go today too far away to enjoy. We had them all handy there, and we just grew up with it. In summertime, we used to go hiking in the mountains. We used to get up every Sunday morning early, and my mom always packed us enough food and everything. We had those backpacks, those rucksacks, and we carried thermos bottles, and we used to go away in the morning, a bunch of us, and come home later in the evening. And we used to, those pine trees and those mountains were just wonderful, the smell and the air. We had so much fun. I mean, we just had a very nice childhood. And considering what people have today, you would think it wasn't much, but to us it was the best, and we enjoyed it. We really had nice childhood, all of us.
What was your favorite pastime?
Well, my favorite pastime was always reading. And but I enjoyed the sports. I wasn't the best one in it, but whatever I did, I enjoyed. And I used to help out a lot of times in the store and at home. We all had chores to do when we were little. There was no such a thing as not helping out. It was just natural. Everybody had a certain chore to do. We just did it. And then there were Sundays, they had soccer games, so the whole town would walk down to the soccer field to watch soccer. And it wasn't a soccer where people competed for prizes. It was for fun. And it was a very, very nice life, I would say.
What was your town like? Was it a large town?
Well, it was surrounded from both sides with 2 rivers. One was called the Latorice, and the other one was called the Svalavka, which was named after our hometown. And it was sort of coming into at the end of the town, it was coming in like into a V shape. The Svalavka was going into the Latorica. And the water was cold. We used to swim in it. It was ice cold. It came from the mountains. And it had a lot of boulders and stones in it. And we used to love to ride down the mountains, you know, we used to tear sometimes our bathing suits because we hit the stones, you know, with the water. It wasn't a waterfall, but it was a pretty, in some spots were pretty rough. And we used to love to ride it. You know, when you're young, you don't worry about these things. So it was you would almost feel like you went, our town was almost like you would go to a vacation time, but everybody worked, you know, but I imagine people would go for that to come from the bigger cities to call it a vacationing place. And not far from us, about 3 kilometers from both sides, were 2 small little places that attracted a lot of people from quite a distance, where they had natural springs, natural spring water, and then they used to come, people in the summer, and spend a few weeks there and just enjoy it like you would go to a spring vacation place. They were set up for it there. They had little, I should say, like little motels or hotels, and people would stay there for a day, sometimes for a week. But that spring water was beautiful, clear water, and it attracted a lot of people. And then in the summertime, my parents always used to go up into the mountains. There was a natural water that smelled like sulfur, and it was called for rheumatism. It was used for that, for people would go for take those baths. And I remember sometimes going in the bath with my mom, and it smelled like rotten eggs. But we would stay there in those cabins for about 3 weeks. You know, each family would have a cabin. And we were right in the midst of the woods, up in the mountains. It was really roughing it in a sense. And the cooking was done out where they had like a mutual kitchen type, that all families that lived in the cabins would take turns to cook on those stoves. And we had such a free time wandering all over those mountains and trails. It was just, we looked forward to it. And then my dad would come on Friday and stay till Sunday, and then go back because for the business was always closed on Saturday. All businesses were closed. In fact, Saturday and Sunday, no business was open there at all. So he would come from Friday afternoon and stay till Sunday afternoon and go back and then be back home for Monday for the business. But Mom stayed with us there, and she always felt that these baths did her a lot of good. And one summer, I don't know what happened, we couldn't go, and she really was aching the whole winter. So she made it her business to go every summer. We went there for about 3 weeks or 4. And those baths were really a great help.
Could you tell me something about your house, your street?
Well, the street was called Duchnovichova.
Could you spell that, please?
Let me see. Duchnovicova. I think I spelled it right.
Was there
and our house number was number 6. Of course, we find out now they didn't change the names of the streets there and the numbers, so that we shouldn't make any claims. They changed it altogether. But that was the name of the street, and I have mail attesting from my relatives here that that's where it was. That's what it was.
What did your house look like?
It was, all the homes had entrances going in through you didn't have an entrance like here. You walk in from a driveway into how should I say, front entrances. Our homes were where the houses had in front of them flower gardens. And they had fences, either wooden ones or wired ones. And on the side next to it was about the width, I would say, about maybe like this, I would say about 14, 15 feet wide. And out of that, one part was for the entrance like a door. And the other part had 2 doors that opened up so that the wagons could come in and bring in the wood for the fire. Because we didn't have, we used wood for the fire, not for the winter, not like here where you have, electrical or gas heat. And that wood used to be brought in by the wagons, and the wagons would come right into the yard, and the length of the entrance on that thing would have been about 50 feet, I think. And then we walked in from there where we had a big yard. Part of it was a flower garden with grass for playing, like a lawn. And then on the right side, there was a shed where the wood was put in, stored after it was cut. And one part was an opening where we had a swing set, and that swing set was used for both purposes. It was used for swings and for us to play on, and then if we didn't play on it, the swings were taken off, and it was used to put the rugs on it and to beat the rugs out, because you didn't have vacuum cleaners. You took the big rugs. Some of them, were Persian rugs, and they were big, and they put out there, and they were beaten out with those bamboo things to air them out and to clean them. So that thing had a twofold purpose. It had you were able to use it as a swing set for the children, and also to utilize it for other things.
What was your kitchen like?
Well, let me tell you first, and then besides that, we had a very, very big piece of property where my parents were very good in gardening, and they always managed to have their own small vegetables like onions, like a small hobby. And my dad, when the store was closed between 12 and 2, he would come home and eat dinner and go into the yard and do that. It was just it was not enough to keep you through, but it was a hobby that they enjoyed. Now, as far as the kitchen at home, it was more like a family room. It had, like you call, the oven was built into the house. It was on top of it, you could almost have somebody sleep. Part of it was a stove, and the other part was the oven, and on top it was, it's hard to describe it. It's, when we had help, they used to sleep on top of that. It was wide enough, almost like a twin size, put a mattress on it, and they would sleep on it. And on the back of it was a smaller oven where you could bake just small cakes, about the size of our stoves here, that I would say a little smaller. But the big oven was the big one where you could bake breads and everything. So it was and the rest of it was tables, and there was a big clothing closet, was a big credenza with dishes in it. It was what you see today, like these modern Danish type of thing. It was a nice-sized kitchen, but it was also a family thing. And then there was a stand for water, because we had to bring the water in. We didn't have water we had a pump outside. And every day we had to bring in the water. So that was my brother's chore, and wood was his chore. So we all had different things to do. So it was a nice, very cozy room, and warm, and we used it like a family get-together. It was a nice-sized big room.
What duties did you have in the house?
Well, I helped for Mom when it came to cleaning up a little bit, washing dishes. My sister and I took turns, and she did it one day, I did it the other, and then I helped in the store a lot, because on Thursdays we had market day, and the peasants used to come down from the mountains, and that was such a busy day that they needed more help than we could even have. But we had helped, and despite all that, even with the chores we had help at home, because everything at home was done It wasn't like here you can go for canned goods or you can go for everything. You had to do everything from scratch. So what we had a lady, a Jewish lady who helped in the kitchen, and we had a Gentile lady who was our nanny, and she was the one that did the washing. She did the heavier stuff. And she, most of the time, she even lived with us because her brother-in-law was like to hit the battle, and he used to beat him up. So she found our home, her home, and I remember her since a small child. She was like our nanny. She was so good to us.
What was her name?
Anichka.
Last name?
Anichka. I don't know her last name. I know she was a little bit short of hearing, and as we got older, we used to tease her, you know, because we would say one thing and she would, she was such a sweet person, and she would say another, you know, and we would have fun because she answered us something different. Her hearing wasn't so good later on.
What was the name of the other woman?
Those ladies, the Jewish ladies, they came recommended for 6 months. They sort of made like maybe it's like they have today the tryouts or learning something, like interns or some kind of things. They would come for 6 months and they would be helping in the kitchen. You know, only for that. You know, they were like part of the family, but not exactly. But they only helped in the kitchen.
Did anyone else live with you outside of your parents?
No.
And sisters?
No. Now, my oldest brother went away to the yeshiva in Pressburg, which is Bratislava, when he was 17 or 18 years old. And he studied there. Then he was drafted into the army because in Czechoslovakia you had to go for 2 years into the army. So he was stationed in Moravia, which is part of Czechoslovakia. There's Bohemia, Moravia, and Slovakia. So he was stationed there and on Brno. He was there for 2 years. And when he got out, he decided he wanted to go to college and to go for juniors. He was a very brilliant man.
His name?
His name was Adolf Bodek. Yeah. And that's when he went to Prague and he studied at the Karlova University for journalism. And he did some, he used to send us home a few articles that he published. But I don't remember much of it because you have to remember we were 8, 9 years old at the time, and you didn't pay that much attention to those things. But I know that he was brilliant because his high school teachers were very angry at my father that he should have gone to college right after high school. He should not have sent him to Bratislava, to the yeshiva. But he was very learned and very bright, very bright.
Back to your home. What was your own bedroom like?
We didn't have single bedrooms. We had bedrooms that we had our own beds, but we shared the bedrooms. They were big rooms, and you had 2 or 3 beds in a room. So we shared it.
Did you have any conveniences in your home?
Well, what do you mean by
such as, did you have any electricity or a radio?
That came later on. I remember when I went to first grade, that this Anichka that was working for us, like our nanny, she was also helping out at the school sometimes. And I remember one day, somehow or other, she was fixing the lamps in the school, and her clothes caught fire. And she had enough sense to jump down and roll herself in mud outside. But I remember that pretty well, the fire and that. But afterwards, they brought in electricity, they brought in radios, and lights and everything. So I think I might have been 6 or 7 when they started to bring all those things in.
Did you have any contact with the outside world in terms of
Oh, yes,
communication, radio?
No, after we had the radio, yes. But before that was only newspapers. There were magazines, there were newspapers. We had a very tiny library, but you had to be almost privileged to be able to get a book out of there, which later on was non-existent for Jewish people. They wouldn't allow it at all. But people studied a lot. Regardless, they had, I think they were more into books then than even after the radio came. People were very studious. Those are the ones I remember, yeah.
What languages were spoken in your home?
We spoke Yiddish, Hungarian, but Olga and I, the children, we spoke Czech all the time. And then German, and we also talked sort of Ukrainian. We learned, I spoke 5 languages fluently at the time. I was just in 1st grade, and it seems like in the last few years I've forgotten a lot, but I used to be very good in all of them. I used to read them, I write them, and this was natural because we were exposed to each other. It wasn't that we had to study the languages, we just grew up with them. And it wasn't hard to switch from one to another.
Can you give me an idea of what your daily life was like as a girl?
As a girl, we went to school. In the morning, we had to get up by 8 o'clock. Our beds had to be made. There was no such a thing. And breakfast, and then we walked to school. It was almost, I would say, about a kilometer. And rain or shine or winter, I remember walking to school in the winter time, and my nostrils, if I had a little sniffle, they were frozen. You had like icicles almost hanging. No, I'm just kidding. And the school was very pleasant in the school. So I have good memories from the schools and childhood and all that.
Was it a private or public school?
Public schools. The Czechs provided public schools for everybody. And they were very good as far as religion or languages. If anybody wanted it, the school was open so they can go and take it after class. But public school was mandatory. But you were able to have other classes in the afternoon. The school was open for that.
We are at the end of tape 1 with Elizabeth Weiss. This is tape 2 with Elizabeth Weiss. Mrs. Weiss, could you tell me a little bit about the Jewish holidays and how Jewish life was conducted?
Well, it was Orthodox. We had, I would say, 98% of the Jewish people in my hometown were Orthodox, and that goes for practically all around us, because that was the norm there. The other way was not. This was the norm. Friday afternoon, you know, the stores were closed. And as I said, Saturday and Sunday, the stores were closed from all people, not only Jewish people. Even the Gentile people were closed on Saturday, which changed later on when the Hungarians took over. But while the Czechs were there, that's what it was. And the holidays were really beautiful, sometimes almost, you would say, sort of boring, because if it was 2 or 3 day holiday, the 3rd day, you know, you got tired even reading or so, but in the morning people went to the synagogue. And then in the afternoon, my dad always had my dad was very good with young people. and they would come over to study with him. He used to study with them, from the Torah and all that. And Dad was not a Chassid. He was just a very learned man. And he enjoyed teaching young people in anything, but especially Saturday afternoon. He would have quite a few kids come over, and it was mostly boys, not girls, I would say. Girls were not that important for that. And as far as the holidays, they were celebrated in a very quiet way, and it was they were quite holy rather than just a. You knew it was a different day than it was a weekday. You knew it was different.
How was Shabbat, for example, different?
Well, Shabbat, you went to, my parents went to shul, and then we would come home, and our dinner was at noontime. And then in the afternoon, and they would take a nap, and we kids would sort of play around and or read or visit each other. Then later in the afternoon, after we had a smaller meal, we would go. We had a corso that's called, which is like a promenade. And this was something that people would dress up and start walking up and down the main street and socializing. Not going to the homes, rather just outside, especially on nice days. I'm not talking about very cold winter days. And we would walk up and down. The main street would be about a mile long, and we would maybe not a mile, but about that much. If I would look at it now, I imagine it would look smaller, but when I was little, it looked big. And we walked up and down and talked and hand in hand, and we just enjoying the evening just by socializing out on the sidewalk and walking up and down. And then Sunday we did, the business wasn't open, but you did a lot of things that you wanted to do at home. And it was somehow or other, Saturday was a day when you knew that the week was for rest, and then it starts out again for work and other stuff.
Can you picture your Shabbat table and who was sitting around it and what was being served?
Well, it was always soup and fish and chicken or beef, depending. And I'm trying to remember, I was a very poor eater, so that was the only thing I gave my parents trouble with. I mean, I was just not a good eater. And Mom was a very good cook, and Dad used to, Mom lit the candles, and Dad went to shul, and then he would come back, and we would have the meal. And of course, there were prayers said in between. And afterwards, we got the dishes done, and we would just relax. I would sit and read by the lights as much as late as I could, and there wasn't the pressure of having to get up early next day to run. You could just relax with it. And then Saturday you got up and you went to shul, and like I told you before. So, and the holidays were more or less like the Shabbat was. I do remember on Tisha B'Av, when the fast day was, that Mom used to make what they call donuts now. She used to make those donuts for fasting out, not before the fast, but to make it when we break the fast for that. And that's what Mom used to make for Tisha B'Av, which was for that. And I'm trying to remember sometimes I seem to get sort of like a blank, you know.
Shabbat, when you had time to relax and play, do you recall who you played with? Did you
with
have
our kids.
A special friend?
Yeah, we were kids our own age. The friend that I had that I liked a lot, one of them died. She was there was a epidemic going through, and it was a large family, and she was the only one that got it, and she didn't make it. She died. She was 11 or 12 years old. I think her name was Dutzi Stern. And then I had a friend, gosh, what a shame. She died in Bergen-Belsen, I was told after. She had trouble with her kidneys. Hecht Shandy. Her last name was Hecht. Hecht, and Shandy was like, you would say Scheindl or something. And she started to have kidney troubles when she was about 15 or 16. She managed to pull through Auschwitz, but when they took us away from there, we were taken to Ravensbrück, and I understand they were taken to Bergen-Belsen. And she died there. She didn't make it. She really was trying her best to stay alive, because she was walking there with a bottle in her hand because of her kidneys. I mean, it was a sad situation. She was a good kid, yeah. But she has quite a few brothers and sisters there was a large family that survived. And some of them are in Israel. I understand one of her brothers is in Denver, Colorado. But I have not been in touch with them. So, but she was, it's sad that they were such good friends, and those are the ones that I lost, because they were both such dear friends. And I had other friends, but these were the closest.
Among your brothers and sisters, did you have a special companion among them?
Well, we adored our oldest brother. Mm-hmm. I mean, when he came home for his furlough from the army or from college, when he had a break, we thought, he was 12 years older than myself and 11 years older than my brother. And we looked up to him like to a god, and he was so playful. He really paid a lot of attention to us. But he was like to every one of us, to my sister and to my brother that was just a year and a half older than myself. We looked up to him, and he was just a role model for us. But we didn't see him often. I mean, those things... whatever it was when I was younger, I don't remember that well. But I do remember the breaks when he had and he came home, how much time he spent with us, and he would tell us stories. And in fact, my oldest brother was going on a date. He took me along on a date. Yeah.
So were you a close family?
Very close family, very close family. And my mom was very, very close to her sisters and brothers. She did everything possible to be of help to them, and they were a very close family. But Mom was really like she wasn't the oldest, but she was like the mother of the family, because the grandparents died when the kids were younger. So she, in a sense, felt like she was the mother to the rest of them.
What kind of a kid were you? What kind of a young girl?
I was, from what I remember, my sister and brother were more mischievous. They were very bright and more mischievous. They got into some more little scraps than I did, and I would always try to cover up for them. I mean, what you consider bad here, it was just minor things, but there everything was very strict. But I seem to have been more laid back. I was more helpful. If I was bad, I can't remember it, but I do remember being more helpful. And even my parents used to say that when the kids grow up and they'll get married, they'll move away most likely, but they're going to keep me. And when I marry, I'll marry a man that's going to take over the business, and they're going to build a house in the back of our house, and they're going to keep me there. The only trouble I gave my parents is with food. I was a terrible eater. I was very finicky. Whereas my brothers and sister, they were so good. I mean, whatever Mom made and put down, and she was an excellent cook, they were happy and satisfied. I didn't complain, but I wouldn't eat, and my parents worried about me that I'm gonna, just waste away. They used to sort of bribe me to give me even a check round to drink a little milk, and I could never drink the milk. I could never drink it. So that I remember that they used to be aggravated about.
As a girl, what possessions did you have that you could call your own?
Not what they have here today. I mean, we didn't, it's in what society you live in. We were, in our hometown, we were sort of the upper class. There were those that didn't have what we have, but if you compare it to what people have today, you would think that we had nothing, but we never knew that we didn't have this or that. We were, we had toys because we had them in the store. I remember once breaking a beautiful porcelain doll, not because I wanted to break it, but my dad brought it home, and that doll was as big as I, and I stupidly went and I put the doll on the box that wasn't strong enough. And I walked away for something, and before I turned around, the box turned over, and those dolls were porcelain. So it just broke to pieces. Well, I didn't get a doll for a little while afterwards. And then we had, a lot of it was we improvised a lot. Like we made our own things. We made from cardboard boxes, we made little houses, and we made all kinds of furniture with it. We made our own plays where we would stage little plays with our friends. We had an awful lot of fun, and a lot of it was what we invented too. And as I said, we had more toys than a lot of the other kids because we had them from the store. We had skis, we had skates, we had bicycles, we had sleds. We used to go sledding a lot. So, but we didn't have each one a separate one. We shared the things. It was always shared. And I don't remember it being a problem sharing it.
In your town, were there both Jews and non-Jews living there?
Yes. There were more non-Jews. We had a lot of Hungarians, a lot of Ukrainians. There were a lot of Schwabs, which are Germans. I mean, these are ethnic Germans. They were called Schwabs. And, but most of the town was Greek Catholic and Roman Catholic. We had two churches. There were very few Protestants, and they were ostracized by the Catholic community more. If they didn't like Jews, they didn't like the Protestants even more. Just didn't. They sort of were sort of like hidden in a sense. This is what I remember. Yeah, there were very few of them, but they were sort of like quiet in a corner.
In the early days when you went to the public school, were you aware of any anti-Semitism?
No, not in the schools, I did not. But I do remember playing with my friend who I went to school with, and she got very obnoxious. She came to our house to play. They mostly came to our house because we had more to play with. and she played with us, and I don't know, she did something wrong or she was mean. I told her to go home. But she got so angry and she called me a dirty Jew. This is the first thing that I remember as a child, that because I sent her home. Up till that point, we never knew the difference. But because I told her to go home because she was mischievous, so that was the only time I remember. On our street, there lived these ethnic German Schwabish family. They had 3 boys, and they would not let them play with anyone. And one day, the oldest one came home from school. No, he did. The younger ones came home from school, and the older one did not. And this was the time of the report cards. Anyway, they went looking for him all over, and they found him. He fell into the river, and he drowned. Well, they tried to make a blood libel case out of it. They started to believe it was, around Pesach time, and they started to make a big stink about it, that the Jews killed him. And usually you never bothered with these people. But in Czechoslovakia, you couldn't do that because President Masaryk was the one who fought this thing in the 1800s. He was a lawyer, and he fought for to win a case with this thing. So there was no such a thing. But finally, after they looked into it and everything, they found out that the boy fell into the river not because he was killed, but because he was afraid to go home. He had a very bad report card. And the parent, the father, was a real Yeki, a real German, and he was afraid to go home with the report card. So instead of going straight home, he walked on the bank of the river, and he slipped into the river. He didn't mean to kill himself, but he accidentally fell in. And that's what happened. So this I remember that happened. And then later on, of course, a lot of it came out. I mean, if it was hidden before, those things came out later on.
Were there repercussions for the Jews because of this incident with the boy?
Well, it wasn't a pleasant thing. There were no repercussions. Don't forget, this was Czechoslovakia, and this was not, Hungary or something. I don't know what would have happened there. But in Czechoslovakia, there was no such a thing, and especially the President Masaryk, who this was known that this was a lie, the whole thing, all these things. But it was a very uncomfortable situation. I remember tension, but I don't remember anything. I just remember that later on they found out that he slipped into the river, that it was because of a bad report card. He didn't dare go home.
How would you describe the climate between the Jews and non-Jews prior to the war?
Very cordial, very cordial. They were not the buddy-buddy friends, but it was cordial. People did business together. It was, we had friends that were Gentile friends. They respected our Judaism. We respected theirs. I had a friend who the father was a Czech official. I used to go there for Christmas. And I always played with her, but for Christmas, I remember there many times, they had the tree up and they had the little candles burning. They didn't have like bulbs here. And they had candies on it. They would offer me candies. And then when they had friends that were Gentile friends there, and if the mother gave them cookies or something, she would tell them that I can't have any because I have to eat kosher. So she knew not to buy. It was a natural thing. It was respectful. And then she used to come, Borzhenka was her name, she used to come to play to our house. It was very pleasant. They were our customers. And it seemed like all it took is just a spark to bring all the hatreds out. I mean, as far as we knew, yeah. There was one other time I remember that we were in Signac there in the mountains for a summer vacation, and we had a friend, Gabriela. She too was a granddaughter of the of Schwabic people. You know, when I talk Schwabs, I'm talking about German ethnic people. And this Gabriela was a very good friend of ours. We would go hiking together and playing together. And then one day, another Gentile girl, she didn't come to the cabins because there was a little small village there of farmers, and her grandmother was a farmer. So she would come to the grandmother, but she would come down to the cabins to play with us. We didn't go for her, she came for us. And we would play together and hike and go down to the canteen. You know, a canteen is like a place where you could buy a few things, you know. They had like a little, it was like a stand, but was indoors. And we used to go to the rivers there and play. And one day another Gentile girl came to visit one of the farmers there. And the two of them ganged up against us. And Olga and I were walking the same trail we always walked together. And they came against us, and all of a sudden the two of them started to call us dirty Jews. Now this was Gabriela, who was our friend and having fun with it. And the next day, because she had her own friend, she picked it up or whatever for no reason at all. There was no disagreement or anything. So you did get once in a while, but overall not.
What was your first sign of danger?
In what?
Prior to the war, as a child.
No.
When did you?
No, the first sign of danger was only when the Hungarians took over. When Chamberlain sold out Czechoslovakia, that's when we started to fear, because you already heard Hitler's speeches on the radio, and you know, we spoke German and we knew it in the papers, and it started to whip up the hatreds among the people. So,
what year was this?
This was in 1938. In 1938.
And you were how old?
I was not quite 14. And at the age of 14, they finally sold Czechoslovakia out. And then they gave it over to a little bit to the Ukrainians. Were there for about 3 or 4 months. And then Hitler, when he took over the rest of Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia, he gave that part to the Hungarians. So the Hungarians came back. And that's when it really started. That's when it really started. Under the Czech rule, it was, you know, you had a little individual, you know, like I told you with these friends, but nothing, there was no major thing. I mean, it was not any different than here.
How were you personally affected when things began to change?
Well, it was, first of all, we were affected because the schooling was curtailed. It started to curtail that. Then eventually they started to take away the businesses. And then they started to make curfews. It was a gradual thing. It didn't happen right away. It was like, you would think that only this will happen, and then a few months later, something else came up. So it was a slow stranglehold where it finally hit in 44 completely.
How did you become aware of these changes in curfew and schooling?
Oh, they told you plain, you know, only so many kids can go to school, and only so many, they allowed you to go into some little private little schoolings that you did, but you couldn't get a certification for it. And you couldn't, and people, if they wanted to, if they were Jews, they couldn't get jobs. Not that there were many jobs before. And the businesses were taken. My dad's business that he worked up from nothing was taken away. And they went to Jewish people with the gendarmerie, which is worse than the police. and they would come and just walk in and say, this business is no longer yours.
When you say they, who are you referring to?
The gendarmerie with the what you call the carpetbaggers here.
And what nationality are
They
you?
were Hungarians.
What
They
year?
came from deep Hungary. They were nobodies. And they came praying, to take over anything that was Jewish. And their eyes saw it and they wanted it. They were able to get it. They sort of tried to make it look legal, where they would give you for something that was worth $1, they would give you a penny. And you had nothing to say about it.
Do you recall the day that your father lost his business?
I think it was in 42 or 41, or maybe before. The only thing is that my dad had such a reputation as far as being a very upstanding, and a decent person, that the mayor of the town, now when I'm talking about the mayor, this is not the mayor that the people elected. This was a mayor that was put in charge by the new government, sort of. And he got to know Dad, and he was already there maybe a year or two, and when he found out that they're going to Bodek's business, he said to them, and the Hungarian guy was going to come with the gendarmerie, he said to Bodek, "You are not going with the gendarmerie, I'm going with you." So he himself came with this Hungarian man, and he tried to put as many brakes on him as he could. But he had to go by the law. But at least he wouldn't allow the gendarmerie. We were the only family that he came to, and he wouldn't let anybody else. So I saw him point. Anyway, so this is what I opened up a mouth at him then. I was a teenager, and I was furious. And I opened up a big mouth at that Hungarian guy, and I remember they were sitting in our dining room, and he said to me, he says, "You little Jew, you get out of here," something like that, in our own home. So Dad couldn't say anything, and the mayor said to him, "Listen, look," he says, I still remember that. He says, "I'm here," he says, "and you are not going to call her any names, and she's going to stay here, and that's it." See, Dad was so upset and so intimidated because he was a veteran in the Austro-Hungarian army for 4 years. He couldn't believe it happening. And I was from the Czech school, so I opened up a big mouth.
This is the end of tape 2 with Elizabeth Weiss.
Yeah.
This is tape 3 with Elizabeth Weiss. Mrs. Weiss, do you remember your father and mother's reaction on the day that your father lost his business?
He was devastated. He couldn't believe it, that it was happening to him. I mean, we had pictures of him in the uniform. He was 4 years, in the army. He was a good, solid citizen. He couldn't understand it. And he was, as much as he was devastated, he kept saying that this can't be lasting. This is just a phase. That he kept on saying, he kept on saying, "I don't think the Germans would do anything like that, that they would, this is with the Hungarians, that it's just a phase." He didn't want to believe that to the last minute, to the last breath, he did not want to believe that anything like this could happen. Even when we got off the train in Auschwitz, he held up the spirits of the people in the train, telling them, maybe they're just taking us to a labor camp. He did not want to believe it. Not that we knew what was going to happen, but he did not want to believe anything else, no rumors at all, if there were any.
Were you affected by the change and do you recall being frightened, having any stress personally because of it at this time?
Well, you couldn't help but do it, because I remember later on when they started to make they made us wear stars. There was a curfew. You could only go out till about 6 o'clock in the evening. You know, you couldn't get there, as far as income, you couldn't get a job. You lived off the few little dollars that you had left from whatever it was. And when it was a stranglehold. They just did it like they choked you alive. And naturally, you know, we were teenagers, and we couldn't. We knew there is a world around us, but somehow or other, we were not in jail, but we weren't free either. And as far as getting jobs or anything, as I said, we were, in order to get a book to read, that little library was not allowed for us. So if somebody had a book or so from someone, we snuck it out and we sort of shared it. And we did some studying, you know, with some people that we knew that we accomplished it, but we have no certification for it, like I said before. But I was telling you about my oldest brother's friend. She was a teacher, and when we had the business, she used to come into the store to buy stuff, and she would get credit. Now, when you had credit in Europe, you didn't have credit where you collected interest. It wasn't a credit card. If they knew you, my dad knew that she was a friend of my brother. She's a school teacher. So she was allowed to buy things to pay him back when she can. And it was put down in the book, but there was not for interest. It was just out of goodwill. And there was also one teacher that was a teacher of my oldest brother, who was the one that was constantly encouraging Dad to send him to the university. This very same teacher also got credit from our store. And when they closed us and money started to be tight because we just got a measly nothing for the business, Dad opened up the book, and I said to Dad, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go and I'm going to try to collect some money. I said we needed to even buy a little pound of flour or something. So I still remember going to her house. She was there with her boyfriend. And again, those homes are always with gates, and you go into a courtyard. And her apartment was further in the courtyard. She was standing on the porch with this, and I came up there, and she recognized me, and I said to her, could I speak to you privately? She says, no, whatever you want to say, you can tell me here. And I said to her, well, you know, I said, they took our business away, and I just thought that since you owe us, my father, money, that maybe you would make a small payment on it. And I still remember her words. She looked at me and she said to me, we owe Jews nothing. That was her answer. So, you know, I was already at that time 15, 16 years old. That was her answer. And she turned around and just ignored me like I was just a piece of dirt there. And that's it. This was a friend. Then I went to that teacher, the one that I told you about, who was more my dad's contemporary, but he was always a good. I come into the house there, and his wife lets me in, and he was sitting at the table. They were playing cards with a bunch of friends. And again, I said to him, because Dad instructed me, don't ask for the money in front of people. So again, I said to him, look, I said, may I speak to you privately? Again, he tells me, well, whatever you want to say, you can say here. So I said to him, well, same thing, please, if you can make a payment, we would appreciate it, very politely. Now, he was embarrassed, in front of his friends. So he said he took out a few crowns and he gave it to me. And I thanked him and I left. I figured it's better than nothing. So he at least didn't make a comment. But it was a downhill thing. I mean, you could already start feeling from the people that lived around you that we were not important enough to be considered as equals, you know. So you could feel that. Then my girlfriend Greta, her name was Greta. Oh, I knew her last name. And her father was an engineer. We had a factory there because there's, you know, in the mountains they would cut wood and export wood, you know, for furniture. So it was a big wood factory there and lumber yards. And that was a little further away from our hometown. And her father, being an engineer, he worked in that factory. And I used to go to school with her. She was also a very bright student. I was also good. This is while we were still going in the Czech schools. But afterwards, we studied together. We were both good at math. She was a very bright girl, and we used to do our homework together. Her mother always loved my mom. They shopped in our store, and she always came to Mom, and she would talk to her and always tell her about her husband, how mean he is, that especially when he drinks, that he's so mean. She was the only daughter they had. And she was like, Mom was like her psychologist in a sense, like her big sister. And when the Hungarians came in, naturally the German fifth column started to sort of like wear their uniforms and start marching on the main streets and all that. And I remember one day being on the street, on the main street, and there comes a marching band with a bunch of Hitler youth, you know, and they were not the majority, the Schwabs, but they already started to feel their oath. And she is marching there, and I take a look, and they pass by, and I take a look, and there goes my friend Greta in a German uniform. I remember I couldn't believe it. Greta, the one I went to school with, I studied with, that the mother was a friend of my mother. And then she stopped coming, the mother, to my mom. Suddenly her problems were no longer needed to be taken care of. And one day I met her accidentally on the street. This is not the same day, it's within, and she recognized, you know, she saw me, and I said to her, "Kiss die Hand," you know, because that was the greeting in German. You said, "Kiss your hand," and you were taught to kiss the hand, and the older person would reach out the hand, and you would kiss it. That's how we were brought up. And she felt a little embarrassed. She said, "How is your mother?" I said, "Well, my mom isn't very well." I says, "They took my brother away to Theresienstadt." She says, "Oh, tell your mom not to worry." She tells me that in German. "Tell your mom not to worry. Hitler isn't so bad. All he wants to do is just send the Jews to Madagascar." You know where Madagascar is? That's the island of Africa. He says he just wants to send them there, but he's not bad. He's not going to hurt the Jews. But she herself never came back, but Hitler wasn't so bad anymore. So you had a lot of these things, people that you were, you know, close to, that there were a lot of other ones. I'm only telling you the ones that were the closest.
What event happened next that affected your family?
Well, then they started to go after people first, the Hungarians, after they took the business away. They started to take a lot of the younger men into labor camps. They didn't want them in the army, but they took them into labor camps. My dad was in his 50s, and they suddenly decided they needed him for a labor battalion in the woods to cut woods. So they took him for a few weeks in the summer. But he came back home. But they also started out after families that were supposedly not Hungarian citizens or Czech citizens, supposedly. That they were not born in that country, that they came from Poland. And they started to look after people that did not have generations back to show that their grandparents and great-grandparents were born in our area or in Hungary. They picked up quite a few people. They picked up one of our very dearest friends, the Zsigmans, the family with the children and everybody. They just took this building that you see there, that building belonged to them. And they took them away from their beautiful home with the children and all, and they just took them into trains, cattle trains, and packed them up and sent them without anything out to Poland into the fields.
What year was this?
It had to be in the 42, 41, 43, I don't remember exactly. It was under the Hungarians already. It was gradual. And my dad's father was born in Poland, but Dad was born in Romania. And Dad got scared because if he's Polish, they'll take all of us away, even though Mom's family was able to from Mom's side, we could show 200 years back of being there in that area. So there was proof of 200 years going back, but it wouldn't have mattered because if Dad's father wasn't born there. So Dad got scared, and he was afraid to go to Budapest. They wouldn't pick him up on the train. So he sent me, and I went to Budapest, and I went into, I remember, to one of the ministries there. I stayed with a cousin that lived there. I stayed there for a few days, and I went into that ministry, and usually young girls, they didn't bother so much as the men. I remember going on the train, and the Hungarian soldiers there, you know, being there, I was pretty scared of them because I didn't want to let on I was Jewish. And at the same time, I didn't want to talk to them either. They were roughies. They were mean, the Hungarians. They didn't take a backseat to the Germans. And I came to Budapest, and I went into that ministry. I still remember a big stairway going up into that room where they had records. And I started to look up the records where supposedly those of Polish ancestry are entered there. I didn't find my father's name there. So when I came back, Dad was at least knew that at least he was not among those that were, but the rest of the Jews were not free, but they were not packed off into no man's land. All they did is drop them off in no man's land in Poland, and there they just shot them down. They picked up my uncle, who was 85 years old, and because it was a curfew, Jews were not allowed to go further than so many kilometers from his hometown, and his grandchildren had nothing to eat. At 85, he decided to go to get to the peasants some food, and they picked him up just where he wasn't supposed, just on the way home, barely coming back with a little sack of flour. And they picked him up, they wouldn't let him go home, and they put him on that train, and they shipped him away. And they came running to us, you know, your uncle has been at 85. They took him away. He never returned. He was most likely shot or killed or bludgeoned there.
What was his name?
His name was Mordche.
Could you spell that?
My mother's oldest brother. It's Mordche. How do you spell it? M-O-R-D-C-H-E. And
do you recall your last sight of your uncle?
yeah, he was sitting on the train. I went down to the train, and he was sitting there like you couldn't believe me. He was just like, at 85, I mean, he just got through pneumonia. My mom just nursed him through pneumonia because the doctors gave up on him. And Mom nursed him through with leeches. She stayed with him 7 days. And she changed those leeches, and the doctor said, don't do it, he's not gonna make it. Because that's how they treated pneumonia back at home. They're coming to it back this time, but that's what it was. And she couldn't forgive herself after he was taken away. She said, I should have just let him die. He would have at least be buried. She says, I saved him for them to pick him up on the road. Maybe a month or 6 weeks later that they picked him up. He went to get some food for his grandchildren. And I remember running to the train and taking some food for him because he wasn't allowed to go home or anything. I brought it to him, and he was just like he lost. I can't explain the look in his eyes. I mean, it was just like he wasn't even alive.
Were you allowed to give him the food or speak
Yeah,
to him?
they allowed you to hand over some food, yeah. The gendarmerie was there, but if you came with food to them, they allowed you for that, yeah. But this was before the big pull away was. This was a year or two before that, when they started to clean everybody out. You know, what I mean by cleaning out, all the Jews out.
What year was this approximately?
When they took us away was in 44. It was in 44. And that was already, the Germans already were not satisfied with the Hungarians doing the job alone. They too came into our town, and they right away, between the Hungarians, the Germans, they requisitioned the home. They did ours. They came in and they lived there. And I remember it was 3 days after Passover. The day after Passover, it was Saturday night, and Dad went for services in the morning. And he came home, and he said to Mom, he says, you know, I don't understand it. He says, at the Goldsteins, which was not far from the synagogue, he says, the police is there. And I don't know why. And we thought maybe something happened, but you were not allowed to go out and see or anything. I mean, you were confined to a certain area, and that's it. And then we found out that they're gathering them together. And they used the synagogue for the gathering place, and they came for us the Tuesday. That was 12 for us. They came on Tuesday, and they took everybody into the synagogue, and they examined the women like a gynecologist to see if they stole if they are taking any jewels with them. And I remember the mayor's wife was a midwife. Now, this was the mayor that was elected by everybody. And she was a midwife, and when she saw Mom, she said to her, Mrs. Bodek, she says, are you hiding something? So Mom said, no. She says, okay, I won't examine you. My mom was the only one. They did it right in the synagogue. That's where they did it. The men were there. Well, maybe they were on the side, but this is what they were doing there. Now the synagogue is a bakery there, you know. They made a bakery out of it.
In the sanctuary?
In the sanctuary, right, inside the sanctuary, yeah.
Were you examined?
They were just children, you know, the teenagers they didn't. They went after married women. They went after married women. And then they kept us overnight there, and they walked us down the street, and you could see people you know, that because the Jews and Gentiles lived in the same streets, they were neighbors, and you could see that they were sort of between the curtains, that you could see some people peeking, and you saw it, that it wasn't from a Jewish home, but they didn't come out to say anything. It was just that they walked out. You felt like a criminal that they walked you down. And they when they came into the house, they came in, we had earrings in our ears that we got when we were born. They were pearl earrings. They took those out. They took everything they could see off you right away. They allowed you to take a suitcase, and they walked you out of there. And I still remember my mom's look when she looked back at the house. Anyway, and to the synagogue they took us. And then the next day they took us to the cattle trace. Anyway. And they took us to a brick factory in Mukachevo, and they kept us there in the open. It was for the night we finally were able to get to see. There was no walls at all there. It was an open, like just a roof that we finally were, and then everybody was assigned a corner of 6 by 6 for a family that you could lay down on the floor. There was no food brought in. There was nothing brought, no water, no nothing. Finally, the few Jews that were left in Mukachevo would sort of get together and sort of bring in a little food, or if somebody had a relative in that city, they were able to bring in a little bit. I mean, and then when they finally brought in from the Jewish organization that was left there, they brought food in. The only one they allowed to divide the food is my father. They kept saying, you know, because everybody was hungry, they wanted to go for it. And they said, no, Mr. Bodek is going to divide it. And he was the one that gave portions from what it was to divide it. And they wouldn't trust anybody else. So,
what was the month and year that you left your home?
I didn't leave it. They took us. It was April 18th they took us away, 1944. That's when they took us away from home.
Did you have time to prepare or pack any provisions?
No, the night before they came and they told you you're allowed one little suitcase and you can just take, that's all. You were not allowed to take anything. But what Dad did, we had insurances Dad bought for my sister and myself. You know, they used to have dowries back at home. And Dad bought one for me for 20,000 crowns and one for Olga. And what he did, he said, just in case we don't get together or anything happens, he wrote, he engraved the numbers of the insurances into the furniture on the door, the inside door. But when my brother went back after the war, the house was ransacked. The house was there, but the house was ransacked. So it's all lost. And the things that Dad buried in the basement, that was dug up. Everything was gone. It was all gone.
Do you recall leaving your home, being forced out of your home?
Yes.
Who was with you?
My mother, my father, and Olga and I. Lou was in the University of Budapest at the time, and he went underground there. And my brother was already in Theresienstadt, and little did we know that he was no longer living. We found it out later. So, and from there, they took us to Auschwitz. We were there about 4 or 5 weeks.
Were you part of a large group of people when you were forced out of your home?
Yes, because they gathered all the Jewish people from our hometown. And from the outlying areas, from the villages, there were a lot of people that owned businesses or farms in the mountains and in the outlying smaller areas. They used to bring them down on wagons. They packed them up and with their few little belongings and put up a whole bunch of people. You know, on one wagon they would bring a whole bunch of Jews in, and they bring them into the brick factories. So there was when we were in that brick factory, there were a lot of people from our hometown.
How did you get to the brick factory?
On the cattle train. They put us into the cattle trains, and that's where we went.
Do you recall walking to the cattle train?
So I told you, we walked down that street.
And what did you see when you walked down the street?
People peeking through windows, so through the curtains looking. I felt like we were criminals walking down, like beggars. I mean, it was the most humiliating feeling and frightening thing to have. And you had the gendarmerie all around you. I mean, it was a feeling like I can't explain. Like you were a criminal or something.
Do you recall your parents comforting you at all?
We stuck together, but all I remember is Dad saying that things will work out. You know, yeah, they did. You know, so that's all I remember.
This is the end of tape 3 with Elizabeth Weiss. This is tape number 4 with Elizabeth Weiss. Mrs. Weiss, are there any particular memories that come to mind of this time?
Yeah, what comes to my mind is that a few weeks before they came for us and took us away, the blinds had to be drawn because all the lights had to be blocked out, not just in our houses, but in the whole town. And I remember one night hearing shooting, and we peeked through the blinds, and you know, the room was dark, but we looked out in the window, and there were the Hungarian officers, drunk, with the Catholic priest drunk, and shooting the guns in the air, and singing foul, dirty songs in Hungarian about Jewish women. And they walked down in front of our house further down. This was one of the things I remember just like today. The other one is that the Sunday when Dad found out that they are starting to take away the Jews, this was early spring, and usually we had a later spring there because it was colder country. It was in mountainous area. And we had beautiful rose, not bushes, rose trees that Dad cultivated with Mom because they were very good in gardening. And the fall before, Dad always took, before the winter, he would take those trees and bend them over and bury the top into the ground, put earth on it, and then cover it with sacks so they wouldn't freeze. And then early spring, he would always uncover it and open it and straighten the trees out. So this way, they were able to keep them year after year. They were beautiful colors, yellow, pink, all kinds of roses. And when Dad found out that Sunday that they're going to take us away, he said to Mom, you know, he says, I think I better uncover those roses because they're buried in the earth, and they should have a chance to grow, you know, to blossom this summer. So across the street from us, because we lived on the fashionable street, across from us was the city hall, and it was also where naturally the Hungarians right away moved into. And all these Hungarian officers were in the windows, and one of them even lived in our house because they requisitioned the rooms. So he comes to the window there, and Olga and I witnessed that. And he stands at the window, and it was on the second floor, and he sees Dad working with the shovel on covering the roses. he yells down, he said in Hungarian to him, Bodek úr, Mr. Bodek, he says, what are you worried about the roses for? Don't you know they're going to take you away? And I still remember, Olga and I remember that so vividly. Dad straightened himself up. He was a very handsome, straight man. They always called him the Duke because of his bearing. And he straightened himself out, the shovel in his hand, and he said to him, loud, across the street, he yelled at him. He says, you know, he says, I might have sinned, he says, but these roses did not. These were Judy, these were exactly the words that Dad said. And you know, it embarrassed them so that they walked away from the window. They stopped. So this is what I just wanted to bring out for you. Yeah. These were the exact words that he said to them. Yeah.
Looking back,
this was a day or two before they took us away.
what was your last memory of a normal life at home?
A normal life at home was till the Hungarians came.
Do you have a memory that stands out of the last normal?
I do remember that the first Seder we had, when this Hungarian officer was already living in our house, that Mom and Dad made the Seder, and only Olga and I were at home with them. And Dad said, he says, you know what, he says, the guy is there alone. Maybe we ought to invite him, let him see what a Jewish Seder is. And when we invited him, he said through the same Hungarian officer that was teasing Dad about the things, we invited him to the Seder. And then the next day he went out somewhere and he came with flowers because Olga was so gorgeous, he had eyes on her. So he tried to, play up to her. She was only 17, and he was bringing her flowers. But at the same time, when they took us away, there was no one to help. But he made that comment where Dad told him, he said, maybe I sinned, but these roses did not. Yeah. So you try to keep as much... with all the things it was, and with all the meager rations and everything, you tried to keep a little religion even if you could. It wasn't easy, but that's the way it was.
Can you describe the conditions on the cattle car?
People were just stunned. They were stunned. People hardly talked. At first, we didn't know where they took us, and then the train pulled into this brick station, because all the factories had railways going with the trains into them. And they told us to unload, and they left us out in the open. And then finally, towards the evening, they allowed us to go under the roof, like I told you, and they divided it into sections, like I would say about the size of 6 by 6 or so area, and for the 4 of us to sleep in there. That's what they gave a family.
How long were you on the cattle car?
Oh, it didn't take long, because it was a 25-kilometer ride. That was not far.
How long were you at the brick factory?
Till May, let's see. I know we arrived in Auschwitz at the 21st of May.
What year?
44. So I don't remember, we were a few nights on the train without food, without going to the bathroom, without water or anything. Everything was shut, it was just those little windows that the cattle train has that you manage to open up for a little air, and there might have been at least 100 people inside of those. I mean, we were jammed like herrings. And then I remember just, so it might have taken 3 days or so to get to Auschwitz. So I don't remember the day they took us. I just remember the day that we arrived to Auschwitz. And it was the 21st. And they kept us on the train for a while. We saw a lot of, fire, but no one thought of anything of it. And you saw a big gate with something like Arbeit macht frei or something. And so we, Dad says, well, they brought us to a labor camp, or something like that. And then they made us get off the train, and they told the man to go on one side. I didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to my dad. And
can you tell us the meaning of the words you
Arbeit
saw?
macht frei, that means labor makes you free. So I guess, people didn't know about the concentration camps. What they did beforehand, the Red Cross, the Swiss Red Cross, helped along to send cards. How they got a hold of it to people that were left at home, that some people got postcards from Auschwitz that we are in a labor camp, we are fine, and it came with a Red Cross emblem. So people thought that they are going to a labor camp. It was a farce, but we didn't know it. It was it was just unbelievable. It was just something that a normal mind could not comprehend, okay? And so Dad was taken to one side, and Mom and Olga and I to another. And there were some very handsome German officers. Of course, Mengele was there. He was as handsome as you can imagine, and they were polished with all the things. They had some little sticks or something in their hand. And I saw him moving people back. And it's not quite clear. I just remember moving Mom away to one side and Olga to another. And then he turned to me and he says, Jung, alt or Jung. That means old or young. And I didn't know what was happening. I said to him, young. So he sent me to Olga. And Mom, I wanted to go with Mom. But the way he separated us, I didn't have a chance to, I still feel guilty about saying that I was young. I didn't know why. He just said alt or jung. And it was dark, it was nighttime already. And then when they separated a lot of people, all of a sudden, they kept walking us somewhere through in the dark, I don't know, through fields or through a road. And all of a sudden, we saw big fires in the open. And everybody started to scream that they are going to kill us and everything. I remember holding Olga's hand and she mine. And everybody was screaming, and we were numb, we were just petrified. We couldn't believe what was happening. And then they finally forced us to go further, and we went further, and we got into a building, and it was like a big building, but we went into some kind of a hallway, and they looked like there was some kind of walls or something on the side. And they took us, and then they made us take off our clothes. They shaved us, and then they said we're going for a bath. And they shoved us like cattle. You didn't have a chance even to, if you had a chance, you were just, this was just I can't explain the feeling. You were just like dumbfounded or something. And they took us into a room. And it was a big room, and there were like big shower heads over. And we later found out that they used the same rooms for gassing, but they showered us. And they shoved us into another room. And this was all the younger people, my age, a few years older, no children, no teenagers. Shoved us into a room, and we sat down, And I just remember not recognizing each other. We were all bald, all shaved off from every corner. And they made us sit down there. There was, we still didn't have any food or anything. And I remember when the water was coming down, you almost licked your lips a little bit. And we sat on the floor, and we were so exhausted, we fell asleep there, like chickens, on the floor. And then in the morning, they came for us. This time, the SS was all there with dogs and guns. And they took us through some kind of a road to another camp. And there were couples, people that were already there before we were there. They were inmates, They were so mean, and they thought that we were pampered kids. We didn't know what it was, and they already suffered for years. I mean, at the time we couldn't understand it. All we remembered that they were very mean. And all of a sudden they started to take needles and start poking numbers on us. And I had one, Olga had after me. Mine, I had a full dose. It was so dark, and they put it on. Then afterwards, when they had us all stamped, you could say, tattooed, they took us to a different camp, I think, in some kind of a long barrack that had wooden shelves like chickens, that you see when you see a chicken place. And they shoved us in so many together, like a herring in there. And after a while, they called us for appel to stand outside. There were no names called, nothing. I mean, you became a number suddenly. But it went so that you couldn't comprehend it even. And then they made us go, and I remember while they were giving us the numbers, those people, we asked them, where are our pens? Where are our pens? We asked them, and they were telling us, oh, look at that smoke. And we didn't know what they were talking about. This is what, they didn't. And then finally one of them said, well, your parents were killed last night. All the older people and all the children. That's when it suddenly, the reality, we at the same time, as much as the reality hit, we thought that they were so mean, because they were mean, that we thought that they were just trying to be mean to us. And it took a few days for us to realize that they were really telling the truth.
Did you ever see either of your parents again?
No, not at all.
What is the last picture you have in your mind of your mother?
My mother being pushed aside, and my dad sort of got lost between the men trying to get his coat or something.
Do you recall the last words that your mother said to you?
Not a word. I mean, it came so fast, not a word.
Your father, do you recall the last
It must
words?
be Barbara.
We paused for a moment and now are continuing. Mrs. Weiss, when you arrived at Auschwitz and you were given a number, you were tattooed with a number, can you show us that number?
Well, my number, I can show you the scar, but my number was taken out when I had surgery. I have the scar of it. It was Dr. Kapitansky, who took it out for me. And see, it was right here. And he took it out. He asked me, he says, when he gave me the anesthetic, he says, while you're under anesthetic, do you want me to take your number out? Because mine was so dark, you could see it from a block away, because I had a very strong dose. And if it would have been inside, I wouldn't have bothered. but on the outside it brought always to attention. I had children in the store ask me if that's my phone number. So when he asked me, I said yes.
Do you recall the number?
I think it was A580. I have it written down, and I have it on my application for my citizenship paper, but I don't.
Do you recall the feeling of getting the number?
No, I just remember it was like, I can't explain you what we felt. It was just being bewildered. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It's like being somewhere where it's not real, like it wasn't real. And then being scared when they told us that our parents were killed. And then shoving us, but as far as the uniforms, the clothing, they took all our clothing away, and they gave us some kind of, I don't remember what it was, some kind of stripes or something. I don't remember exactly, but they gave us something to wear that looked like a prison thing. And they kept us there in that place, and at night they gave us a little ration of bread that was maybe 4 by 4 square and maybe 2 inches thick, and maybe a little piece of cheese that was like I would say an inch by inch square. And then they took us outside to count us for appel. We had to stand in the cold there for hours in one place, and then they let us go back in. And in the morning, this went on for a few days, that they were constantly counting us. I don't know how many times a day.
Could you tell me what is appel?
Appel means that they take you out, and you have to stand next to each other, and they count how many are you.
What time of the day was this?
It could have happened any time of the day. It was at night time, it was in the morning, and they let you stand there for sometimes an hour or longer. You just stood there.
What were you wearing at this time?
Just those little things that they gave us, whatever it was. It wasn't a coat, it was just some kind of I don't remember what it was. I know it wasn't our clothing. And there was no coat. And then if you had to go to a bathroom was a latrine, where it smelled to the dickens, and that's where you went if you had to go. And I remember hearing music from a distance and walking some prisoners with some music things. We weren't close to it, but something, whether I saw it close or not, I don't, but I remember something, you know. And later when I was liberated, I found out that they had an orchestra, so it wasn't just my imagination, but it's not quite clear what I saw. And then one day, I don't know how many days or a week or two later, they came and they picked out a whole bunch of us to go to work to Birkenau. We didn't know what Birkenau was, but they took us back to that place, which was the crematoria, which was right where we first were taken. So naturally, when we saw ourselves going there again, you right away start thinking, now what? But they took us there, and there were barracks there. I don't know how many, but it was like a street, and barracks on each side, and there were 3 crematoria there, and we were put into those barracks and put to work to sort out clothing. You know, piles, there were mountains of shoes and mountains of this and jewelry, and everything had to be sorted, and beddings and all kinds of things, and each one was put in a different barrack. So we weren't there more than a day or two. This Eliška that I showed you on the picture heard my sister and myself. We always talked Czech to each other. We were always that way, even when the Hungarians were. They always talked Czech. To our parents, we talked Yiddish, but with each other, we talked Czech. And she heard us talking in Czech, and she comes over, and she said to me, "Oh, you speak Czech?" And we said, "Yes." She says, "Where are you from?" And we told her that we are from Svalava. And she says, "What's your name?" I said, "My name is Eliška Bodek," because that was the Czech name. And Olga says, "I'm Bodek." She says, "You know, I had a friend at the university in Prague. His name was Adolf Bodek." Talking about a world. And we looked at her. "You knew my brother," you know. And she finally said to us, she says, "I'll tell you what." She was already in charge of a few things. She said, "I'll tell you what." She says, "I'll try to pick 10 girls that you know from your hometown that are your friends, and we are going to make a Trägerkommando. That means a carrying commando, you know, and pick 10 of them, and you girls will not have to do this. What you'll do is what the others sort out, you will just carry into the barracks. You know, so that means we'll just carry the stuff in." So we picked 10 girls from our hometown, our friends, and we started to carry whatever was packed up. Well, I saw jewelry in my life. No jewelry store has that much. That was put into big iron, like almost coffins, you would say, the size. That was all packed, and you know, and we had to bring whatever it was to add to it. That was in one barrack. The other barrack was bedding and all kinds of other things. And that was day after day, and I remember one day, one of my friends said to me, she says, "You know, there is a doctor there." And every day we saw transports of people going in and not coming out. Older people, people with children that were not old, but with children, and all you could see is smoke and fire afterwards, and the smell was just horrible. And I remember one day one of my friends comes over, she says, "You know, there is a doctor here in the crematoria," because our barracks was divided with fences. You know, they had sort of fences in between. Whether they were wired or not, I know we didn't touch him. And she says, "He is out there now, and he works in the crematoria." So she says, "Do you want to come and see him?" So we come there, and I still remember his face. He was a doctor from Mukachevo. And we asked him who he was. Now, I don't know if he was a dentist or a medical doctor. So he told us that when he was brought to Auschwitz, when they were standing outside Appel, they were picking men to work. And they asked first, "Who are the doctors here?" And he raised his hand. He figured as a doctor, he'll be useful. So what they did is he says, "Would you like to know?" And he was like, his smile was, I still remember his face. I couldn't describe it, but just that crazy smile. And he said, "Would you like to do what I'm doing?" He says, "I'm pulling teeth out of the dead bodies." That's what they needed a doctor for. I remember once coming at transport, and they were gone. And, you know, they had little windows in those crematoria where they were putting in that cyclone gas. They were throwing it in from the outside. And I remember once a hand sticking out, must have been in agony, because they piled people on top of each other. They were small rooms. I found it out later. And somebody came, I don't know if he hacked the hand off or hit the hand there, you know. I mean, talking about cruelty. And then a few weeks later, all of a sudden, my sister started to get a heavy breast, and it became harder and harder and harder. And we touched it, and it became like a stone. And there was one young man there that also worked with these, separating. He was a medical student that was brought there because people came, they had sugar, they came with little vials of medicine. And he was the one that was working with that to sort it out and put it into a different place. So somebody told us, he's from Slovakia. This guy is a medical student. Maybe he can help you. So we went over to him, and he came over and he checked Olga's breast. He says, you better go to the Revere. He says, this is serious. To go to the Revere meant to go into Mengele's hand. We knew it. And the decision, we told him, I says, what are you talking? He says, it's no good. He says, you've got to do something. He says, her chances there will be better than here. She looks healthy. And maybe, anyway, she went there. Olga, she got some of, I don't know how we got into it, but she got back into that Revere Revere is like a hospital. And she got in there, and there was a Russian woman doctor, a prisoner, who took a liking to Olga.
This is the end of tape 4 with
Oh, my
Elizabeth
God.
Weiss. This is tape 5 with Elizabeth Weiss.
She went to the infirmary, and this medical student that helped me out trying to find vials to see if anything is there, he didn't know exactly, but hopefully, and I used to smuggle those through. I don't want to describe how, but I used to smuggle them through by volunteering to carry those. They used to bring in food and big kettles, the heavy ones. It was like mud. It was all mud, and it was awful heavy, and I used to volunteer to go for it just so I could sneak into the infirmary, okay? And this Russian woman doctor, I used to hand over these little vials to her, and she looked through them. She says, no, this is not good, this is not good. I used to, when I found cigarettes between the things, I used to smuggle the cigarettes in to try to trade them in for something that she could use, Olga. And one day she said to me, just bring those vials, and they found out that somebody was caught because every time you went from one camp to another, there was a sentry standing with a gun and checking what you carry. And I carried it on my body. And this time, I finally decided, when I heard that somebody was caught and was shot, I figured, this is it. I can't put it on my body because if they search me, they'll find it. So what I did, I took a handkerchief that I found, and I put some of those vials in, and I tied it like this here, and like this. And I carried it in my open hand. I figured if it catches me, at least it's in my hand. That was worse than stealing gold or cigarettes, because they send those vials to their soldiers to the fronts. They sent it to their own soldiers. So that was a terrible thing to be found. And I finally decided I'm just going to carry it in my hand, come what may come. We come to the sentry, and he said to me, these are the exact words, he said to me, "Was hast du dort?" What do you have there? Because I carried the can and the other. And I looked in his face, and I said to him, "Brot, bread." I don't know what happened. He didn't bother looking, and he let me go through. It was just unbelievable. Would I have said I had nothing, I would have been searched like everybody else. But he said, "Was hast du dort?" And I said, "Brot." And he let me go through. I brought it to that Russian woman doctor. You sneak through in order to get through. It wasn't so easy. And she said to me, she looked through it, she says, "There's nothing in here I can use." She says, "But I'll tell you what, I will try to trade it for something that can help her." Meanwhile, she did 2 or 3 surgeries on Olga on her breast to push out the pus from her breast without anesthetic. And Mengele would come there every morning to pick out those that didn't look right to send them to the chamber. And when he would come towards Olga, she would say to him, "This girl is strong. She'll go back. She only needs a few more days." She sort of like watched her. She was a prisoner herself. Anyway, Olga got better. It was still not completely healed. She decided that they were going to send her to they decided they'll send her to a camp. She was worried they're going to send her somewhere else. So she had enough guts. She walked into Mengele's office. He was flabbergasted. And she said to him, "You know, I have a sister and I worked in Birkenau." And she says, "I want to go back to my sister. I want to work there." And he said to her, "Okay." He said, put her on one of those trucks. She didn't know if he's sending her to the crematory or to me, but he sent her back to me. I guess he figured we were doomed anyway there. If the Auschwitz would not have been close to being liberated, all the people that worked in the crematoria would have been eliminated anyway. So he figured, what the heck, let her go to the sister, let her be there. Then January the 18th, we saw the front already. We saw the skyline. You could hear the gunfire, and you could hear the like bombings. And the sky was already light at night the night before. And the next day, I don't know if it was nighttime or daytime, they took us and they walked us out of Auschwitz. And that's when the death march started. And we they walked us, it was snow outside, and they walked us through a field. This is where that Shandy Nebuch with her bottle was walking. And the SS was with the guns and with the dogs around us. If you had to go and relieve yourself, the dogs would jump on you. I remember I had the dog on top of me. And most of the time people didn't dare go. And then finally they stopped us somehow at night on a field of snow, and we were told to rest there for the night. I guess they were waiting for the cattle trains to come or something. I don't even remember how we got on those trains. All I remember that we slept outside in the snow, and it became suddenly warm. We found out later that it was a place where they put the cow's manure and the horse's manure for fertilizing the fields. But it was warm and the snow was over it, and we huddled to each other, all of us. And we slept through the night. I do remember a commotion. A peasant woman came running in with a bucket of potatoes, and everybody was starved and hungry. They practically almost killed her. And poor woman, she tried to be helpful. I mean, I don't know where she is, but she was an angel, really. And then she said she's going to come back, but I don't remember anything after. We never got anything. And all I remember afterwards being on the cattle trains, going through Magdeburg and going through Berlin. And Berlin, when we found out this was Berlin, because, from the trains there was a whole bunch, and the rumors came through, and all of a sudden, I remember Berlin like a skeleton, like an erector set, all bombed. And, we had no feelings at all, just to try to hold on to each other. But that was the first time of feeling that wonderful feeling of vengeance. Well, they got it too. And they took us through Berlin, and they took us into Ravensbrück, and there it started again, where they started to put us, and what they did there, they put Russian women prisoners, overseers, over us. They were prisoners, but they were mean and rough. And they ate that little bread of ration bread that they finally gave us, and we didn't dare eat it up right away. We put it under the pillow. It was gone. They stole it when we slept. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And from there, I don't know how many days later, they walked us to Malchow, which is a camp where we sat, and the lice were as big as flies, full of them. All we were doing like monkeys is licing ourselves. This is where this Elishka, my oldest brother friend, got dysentery, and she died there. I remember we went to visit her, even though she had dysentery, but she didn't make it. And while they walked us there to Malchow, we were so ragged, we were just skeletons. I remember these German young kids, 10, 12-year-olds, are throwing rocks at us. As we walked, they were stoning us. And I mean, we looked like, we didn't look even like human beings anymore. And anyway, when we were in Malchow, we didn't get any food at all. I don't know how long we stayed there, and just remember again being on cattle trains, taking us through Frankfurt on the station, and the British bombers were bombing. And I remember we were looking up from these open trains. These trains were open cattle trains, and seeing the bombs coming down just like stars. It was just like fireworks. It's so beautiful as long as it doesn't hit that person. And it hit the end of the train. Meanwhile, what they did, they left us purposely on the railway station, where the station was, and they disappeared, the Germans. They left us there. They figured let the Americans or the British hit us, you know. So the end of the train got hit. Somehow or other, we survived, and the train pulled into Leipzig. And in Leipzig, they sort of deliced us with some very strong stuff. They put us into, first they put us into a place, some kind of a big building. Then they put us to work in an ammunition factory, where we were putting in from the rockets, the shells. We had to put them on some kind of a conveyor belt, and those were awful heavy. Olga's breast was not completely healed, and I was afraid that it's going to tear open even more. So you had to do so many, so I even undertook hers. And my back went out, and there was one, I don't know if he was Italian or who was also from the laborers that were brought in, you know, a prisoner like a laborer, but they didn't gas them. And when he saw that, he took a liking to Olga. He helped me. So it's this was one thing. Then suddenly, when my back went out, I went into the infirmary because I couldn't move. And all of a sudden, whether the same day or what, the sirens were blowing, and the air attack came, and they pushed us all under the building in a bunker, you know, inside, on the bottom of a building. The building was hit. Now Olga came running for me so that I would be with her, and in the bunker we heard the hit. The building was hit. And I remember the lights went completely out. It was pitch dark. We were holding hands, and the ears, like the eardrums, we couldn't hear any. You know, it's like they burst. And it took a while to get the hearing back from each other. We just held on tight. And then afterwards, I remember somehow they walked us on a death march again, somewhere through fields and through forests. I don't remember how many days and which way, but all of a sudden, we slept outside, and all of a sudden, one day, we wake up in the morning, and we see the Germans are gone. We got scared because we thought that this is it. They're going to come with the machine guns and finish us. So we just sat there. We didn't dare move. And we sat and we sat and we sat, and we were afraid that if we moved, that's when the shooting will start. Finally, somebody got up and started to walk, and then another one. I don't know what length of time. And they walked, and we watched, and they walked away. And all of a sudden, the rumors come, the war is over, and Roosevelt is dead. And we said, that's just German propaganda, and the war is over. We were sort of left in a no man's land, and the SS disappeared. And we started to walk towards the villages to see maybe we'll get some shelter or some food. And as we start walking, we got tired, and we sat down on a little hill. I remember the grass was green and trees, it was beautiful, and we were exhausted. And all of a sudden, 2 Russian soldiers walk over to us, and we spoke a little Russian, more Ukrainian, and they come over to us, and they asked us if we are hungry and where we're from, and not just us, the group of us, it was a whole bunch of us, and we are hungry, and and we said to them, yes, and they said to us, well, if you wait till the evening, we'll come for you. We can bring you into our camp, and we can give you food and clothing and soap. You can clean yourself. And we said, great. He says, don't go anywhere. Just wait for us till the evening. What did we know? This is it. The Russians, here. We were sitting there a while, and all of a sudden a very handsome Russian officer comes up, and very stern, and comes up to us, and he said to us, what are you doing here? And we told him that we are waiting for your soldiers to come for us. He says, you get up and you get going and you get into town. And we said, no, we are not going. We're going to get food. I'm laughing now, after you find out what was happening. I says, no, we're not going. We're going to get food. And we thought, he's a Russian, we can talk. He says, you are going right now. And he made us get up and go. We went into the village. It so happened we found a Czech family there. The few of us, not all, but a few of us, we got scattered between the inhabitants there. And we happened to find an older Czech couple whose 2 daughters married Germans. And because they married Germans, they moved to Germany. And they took us in. They gave us bath. They gave us soap. They hid us. And that's when we found out what's happening. They hid us in the attic. After they gave us food and everything, they hid us in the attic, and he says, they go around raping. We didn't know anything. What did we know? So they hid us there, and we stayed there a day or so, and from there they told us there's some kind of a camp where they gathered the refugees together. I don't remember the name of it or what, and we started to walk towards that camp. How we got there, honest, I don't know, but we got there somehow. I remember there were a lot of these slave labor people, I should call them, that's what I meant. These slave labor people, they were from Yugoslavia, they were from Italy, they were from all nationalities in Europe. And there were 2 Yugoslavians there as we walked, and they saw we were tired. They had a bicycle, and one had a piece, Zeph is going to sort of see red maybe, and he had a big piece of pork, what is it called? It's that fat, that smoked fat. We didn't have food for days or anything and stuff. And they hardly had what to eat. They sliced off little pieces for us to have something. And they took turns to drive to Olga on the bike, and then they took turns taking me and the other kid. They gave us a chance because we were just dragging. And we got somewhere into a barn for the night to sleep over, and a lot of these slave laborers, these men, they stayed downstairs and they pushed us into the hay, into the barn, because it was open fields, somewhere in an open farm. They said that we know that the Russians go looking all over. So they stayed downstairs, and these were Gentile men, slave laborers, that watched over us sleeping. Now, I'm not talking just the two of us, I'm talking the whole bunch of us, that we shouldn't have any harm. And the next day they gave us a little piece of soap, and we walked over there. They both wanted to, these two Yugoslavians, one wanted to marry Olga, the other one wanted to marry me. Then there were the Italians, they were playing the beautiful Italian songs. You know, they had their music, they were allowed. And one of them came over to Olga, and he was so in love, and he said to her, "Olga, you're coming to Italy with me." Olga said to him, "I'm not going with you." She says, "I'm Jewish." He says, "That's okay." He says, "That's okay. I'll take you to my mother, and all you have to do is cross yourself, and you'll be fine." I'll never forget these words. Anyway, meanwhile, the Czech buses came in from Prague. Prague sent out for their own citizens buses, and we went on those buses, and they took us back to Prague. And there we got into, that's another story, you know. They brought us to first night to a monastery where the nuns gave us chocolate to eat. And don't ask, that chocolate was the worst thing we could have done on a stomach. I had such terrible pain, almost dysentery in Prague. I couldn't walk the streets. It was just running out of me like water. Wouldn't I have eaten the chocolate, I would have been okay. And the next day, because we saw it's a monastery, we felt we are going out of here. I don't need their favors. They help. We saw a lot of them help, and we didn't want their help. To be honest, that's all there's to it. From what I hear now, there were a lot that helped. We didn't have that experience. We didn't have it. So we didn't want to stay there. We went somewhere else, some kind of a place. And as we walked on one of the, what is it called, like a plaza, you know? And Olga and I walked to go to register for rations or something, and all of a sudden we take a look, and our uncle comes walking towards us. And we stayed together after that. He was like a chaperone for us after that. He was able to get a small apartment. And then Lou came from Budapest because he worked underground. He was able, as an interpreter, yet from the Russians to be allowed to come to Prague. And how we met was that there was one friend of my brother's from the university, a Gentile lady. Her name was Anička Přibilova, and all these few things I have from my brother, when he was taken to Theresienstadt, she kept it for him. That's how I have it. And what she used to do, she promised my brother that she will send once a month a card to my mother just to tell him that he's okay. She never heard from him, but because she promised my brother, she used to send cards to my mother just to try to assure her that she's in touch with him, which was a lie, and I think my mother knew it because she used to look at the card and put it aside, like she had a feeling. But the thing is that we had her address. Lou had her address. And when Olga and I were separated, even in the infirmaries, we used to say, Olga, if we get separated and if we survive, remember this address, that's where we're going to meet. Sure enough, when we got to Prague, we went right away to her house. She was thrilled to have us. When Lou came from Budapest, he remembered the address. He went straight there too. And that's how we got together. And then, then I wrote to America, we wrote, and they said, what do you need? I said, we don't need anything, just get us out of Europe. We want no part of it. And they managed to get us out, my husband and his mom, and they managed to get us out of there. And we came in, I came to this country in 46, on June 24th, and Olga came in May. She came because she came as a war bride, because she met Mickey in Prague. He came to Prague, and she met him, and that's when they got engaged. So the wedding was in Germany then, and that's how we came to the United States. So Olga came as a war bride, and I came with my uncle, and Lou and Kathy were in Sweden, and they sent visas there, and they came. A week later, Lou came. So they managed to bring us out right away. And if Olga wouldn't have married Mickey, Ed would have brought her out too, So, and his mom, So that's being here in this country. And there are a lot of details that one can't go into and everything,
What month and year did you arrive in America?
I came in June 24th, and Lou came July the 1st, and Olga came in May. I have it written down.
Can you tell me the year you arrived?
46. We came in 46, yeah. We came in 46, and then Ed and I got, he told his mom, he says, that's the girl,
How did you meet your husband?
He brought us to this country. We were distantly related, and his mom and him brought me out, but he didn't bring me out to marry me. He brought me out, he brought out the other relatives.
So when was the first time that you
The first time I saw him is when I got off the boat, and he said to me, he says, I still remember a little girl, red like a what is it called, these, they have these long, like a lobster, red like a lobster, getting off the boat because I was out on the sun and in the salt, and all I had with me was a woolen short sleeve sweater. That's all I had, and I can show you the suitcase I came in, and that's what I came on the Marine Purge, by the way. Marine Purge, that was a transport boat for the soldiers going there and coming back. And when we came in, everybody was sick on the boat. I was not, because one day when I thought I'll get sick, I held on to the rail and kept saying, no, you're not going to get sick. My uncle, meanwhile, got married in Germany, and he and his wife were sick like dogs, and I would try to bring them food down. They would chase me out. They didn't want to see food. But then when we came into the, coming to New York, and we saw the Statue of Liberty, I can't tell you what kind of a feeling that is. And anyway, I remember there was a Yugoslavian officer who was coming, was a friend of my uncle's. They befriended on the boat. And he kept saying, while I would go down to take some food for my uncle that he didn't want, I would offer it to him. And he didn't want it. He used to just curse, he says. He cursed Columbus for discovering America. And I kept telling him, you'll be all right, you'll be all right. But then when we came there, as big as he was over 6 feet tall, everybody was crying on the boat. Yeah, and we all thank God for bringing us here. And also, at that time, all the soldiers were coming back, so you had those big, big, big signs on the where the boats dock, on the docks. Welcome home, well done. And we didn't know anything. We thought it's for us, And we were so happy. Look how they welcome us here. They even have big signs for us. I found out later it was for the soldiers, but it was a good feeling for us.
This is the
And then then when I got into the place where they look through your to meet the family, I sat down and cried. I don't know, everything just came loose.
This is the end of tape 5 with Elizabeth Weiss. This is the beginning of tape 6 with Mrs. Elizabeth Weiss. Mrs. Weiss, how many years were you married?
43 years. And it was a very nice marriage. My husband was a graduate of CCNY, okay? I'll say that. And we have 2 children and 7 grandchildren. I have a son and a daughter-in-law, and a daughter and a son-in-law, and wonderful grandchildren. I'm very proud of them, and I love them dearly.
Have you been able to speak about your experiences with anyone else?
Not with my children, not with my husband. I have difficulties with it.
Why is that, Mrs. Weiss, that you have not so far?
I get physically and emotionally sick. I try to push it away as much as I can. I know that one should speak, and I admire those that can do it. And I feel guilty that I can't be talking about it. Like a lot of my sister was very active in Ann Arbor. She gave lectures at U of M and Eastern, and she was speaking about it all the time. But I find myself that I am just devastated when I start out.
Why did you decide at this time to come forward and speak?
My children were asking me, and my niece and my 2 nephews, they felt that I'm the only one left in the family that I should, beside their mother, I should speak about it too.
Do you feel that your experiences during the Holocaust affected the way that you raised your family?
Probably it did. I did not talk to them about it because I felt that I would not be able to be balanced in a way so that it wouldn't affect them. I wanted them to have a normal life, just like other children that are born to parents that haven't gone through it. I didn't want that burden on their back. I can't express it any better, but I think that, if the fact that I had difficulties talking about it, I think it's a combination of all.
Is there anything else that you'd like to tell me about yourself?
Well, I don't know. I guess I'm not a good judge about myself. I know that since I came to this country, I worked hard all the years. I'm retired now, and I enjoy visiting my family and my grandchildren, and I take pleasure in their successes, and I hope to God they stay healthy and that the children grow up to be good human beings. I don't know what else I can tell you.
Is there any special message that you would like them to remember from you?
To keep the family together. The few of us that we are, we should stick together. Whether we have different ideas or anything. The main thing is to accept each other the way we are.
How do you feel living through the Holocaust made you who you are today?
Well, that's a big question. I never had a chance to have it differently, so I mean, this is just something that's that I'll never be able to shake, no matter how much I try to push it in the background. It doesn't take much for it to come up in the open, just like an open wound. And I guess I try to shield myself from it if I can, but it's there, and it's something that it's just something you can't shake. But how I would be otherwise, I don't know. We never have a chance to live life over differently, so I guess this was my, what do they call, destiny or something? Yeah. I just wish there would be a good world for everybody, and people shouldn't hate each other.
Thank you, Mrs. Weiss.
Okay.
Mrs. Weiss, who is in this picture?
My father, Samuel, my mother, Helen, my oldest brother, Adolf, who's 12 years older than myself, my younger brother, who is a year and a half older than I, Louis. I'm on the right, and Olga is the youngest. She's next to my mom. You know, that's my husband's father, Samuel, and my husband's mother, Sarah.
Mrs. Weiss, what is this picture of?
This picture was taken in 1993. A friend of mine went back to my hometown, and she took the picture of our house. It's standing there, and she was nice enough to bring me a tape of it, too.
And what is the location again, please?
It's on Svalava. The street that I remember was called Duchnovichova 6.
In the city and
Svalava.
in the country?
The country now, I guess it's Ukraine, but it was Czechoslovakia.
What is this picture?
This picture is where my dad had started his business. This was taken before I was born, a little bit after World War I, and my dad is in front there with another gentleman, I don't know who, and my dad is standing there. It's the one on the left side, and the street at that time was called Masarykova ulice, and it was number 1, and it was in Svalava.
Thank you. Who is in this picture?
This is my brother Adolf, who was in Prague, and this was before 1943 or so, or maybe 1930s, late 30s. He was a student of journalism at the university, it was called Karlova University in Czechoslovakia.
Thank you. Who is in this picture?
That's my brother Lou, and he was a student at the university in Budapest, and he came to Prague to find us.
Thank you. Who is this?
This is myself in 1946, a few weeks after I came to this country.
Thank you. Who is in this picture?
This is my Uncle Joe, my father's younger brother, who's lived in Wilkes-Barre for, I would say, since the beginning of the century. And that's myself with him. I was visiting for the summer.
Thank you.
I had that made from scratch.
Who is in this picture?
That's my sister Olga and my brother-in-law Mickey. When they got married in Bad Mergentheim, she came to this country as a war bride in 1946.
Thank you. And who is this?
This is my husband Ed, before we were married. He's a very good-looking guy.
Who is this?
This is my husband Ed, my son and my daughter and myself. Just being together, it was great.
Thank you. Who is this?
This is myself and my son Steve. He was adorable. He was a little fatty butch.
Who is this?
This is myself and my daughter. She too was a little fatty butch. I had most beautiful children.
Thank you. Who is this?
This is my husband Ed. It was about the time we got engaged.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I miss him.
Who is this?
This is myself in 1946, I think either January or February. It was taken in Bad Mergentheim, Germany. It's just before I came to this country.
Thank you. Can you tell us what this is?
Yes, this is the picture that we had on our veranda. My father and mother had this made by an artist to celebrate the birth of their children. And I'm the only one left from the four of us. So it's something that was found in a pile of junk in front of the synagogue, and somebody was nice enough to recognize it and bring it to my sister, and I had it framed just the way it was brought back to us.
Who's in this picture?
My sister Olga, my brother Lou, and myself at the wedding of Olga's son in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Who is this?
This is my son and my daughter-in-law in St. Louis.
Thank you. Who is this?
This is my oldest granddaughter, my two grandsons, and I just love them dearly, and I miss them a lot because they live a little bit further away than I would like.
Thank you. Who's this?
This is my daughter Barbara and my son-in-law, and they live in town. They have 4 children, and I enjoy them very much.
Who is this?
These are my daughter's grandchildren who live in town here, and I'm lucky to have them, so I can see them as often as I like. I think they like me a little too.
Who's this?
This is my whole family. They were visiting here. My son and daughter-in-law and the grandchildren are visiting here, and we had a very nice get-together. It was taken in the early 80s. No, later 80s. About 86 or 87.
What are we looking at here?
These are my boots that I came to from Prague back to Germany, where Olga got married, and this is the suitcase that brought me from Prague to Germany and to the United States. That was my belonging, or these were my belonging, I should say.
This is the conclusion of tape 6 with Elizabeth Weiss. Thank you.